Welcome to the Aligned Powerhouse, the podcast for executive women who are done leading from burnout and ready to rise from alignment. I'm your host, Dr. Brittany McGeehan, licensed psychologist, high performance and mindset coach, and guide for high achieving women who are ready to lead, live, and love without abandoning themselves. Here, we unpack the nervous system truths, mindset shifts, and emotional patterns that drive your leadership so you can build power from the inside out. Let's get into it. All right. Hello. I am recording today's episode for all of the moms who are on their journey with self-healing. So whether you have just started this journey, it's something that you're considering, or maybe you're in a space where you've started it, and even though you walked in the door for yourself and you said, I really want to work on these things to heal my marriage and show up better for my children, the deeper you get into it, the more you're like, oh my gosh, what am I doing to my children? This always happens when I'm working with clients. So when you onboard with me, essentially, I tell you I'm going to get all up in your business. I have all these questionnaires. And then we do an onboarding, a kickoff call, right? Kickoff call is like 3 hours long. And inevitably, like what I'm doing is I'm walking through the roadmap to success, how we're going to get from point A to point B. And part of that is I'm giving you insight on what I'm seeing in your relational dynamics before we've actually even ever started coaching. Okay. Inevitably, every single time, the reason that I am recording this podcast is every single time what I hear is, oh my gosh, I think I've done that with my child. I think I've done that with my son. I think I've done this with my daughter. And I'm always kind of waiting for it. And it usually happens whenever I'm talking about specifically the things that they should have received in childhood. We go down the needs and what it means to be a present and attuned parent, and instead what their parents did. So usually we're talking about enmeshment. We are talking about not holding a healthy boundary and practicing healthy curiosity or being emotionally available for their children. And I watch and their face just falls, right? And it's usually around this time. Sometimes it's a little bit later on our call, but for me, I'm just waiting for it to happen. I always prep them at the beginning. It doesn't matter. There's just this moment where you can see them sink, because every single client that I've ever worked with, every parent I have ever known has always wanted to do better than their parents, right? I always say that we're recycling. We take some things that worked good enough and we want to continue those. And there are a lot of things typically that we want to recycle. We just want to change how it's being used, how it's showing up. And inevitably there are things that we want to leave altogether, right? But I have never met a parent who did not want to do better for their child than what they received. This is human nature, right? And so for these high performing women who pride themselves on going above and beyond, doing all of the things, and that they have read the books, they are doing all of the things, to then hear that they are probably recreating some of these patterns that are unhealed from their childhood, and they're recreating them with their children. Like it's just, I always say it brings out like the anxious mother in me, and I just want to like give them a hug and be like, hey, and also how cool is it that we're doing this work, right? But anyway, this is what prompted me to record this lesson, because I know that if it's happening behind closed doors when you're in coaching or therapy or wherever, that inevitably it's happening other places too, right? And I think this is something that women in particular, we struggle with. We struggle with not knowing if we are enough as a mother, and not knowing and not trusting ourselves to know that we are doing right or good enough by our kids, right? So I'm recording this episode so that you can have some insight into possibly, like what you are passing down to your kids, but also is like a gentle hug of we are all in the process of becoming in everything, but especially in our motherhood, right? But here's what I want you to know is that it's not about what you say to your kids. It's about what you model more. I'm going to say that again. And if you've got a pen, I want you to write it down. And if you don't, I want you to pull out your phone and write this down. Our children do not listen to our words. They follow our example. So today we're going to talk about how does unhealed trauma actually show up in your parenting, even when you're trying to do it all right. And I'm going to share how healing changes what your children absorb from you and what can emotional safety actually look like in action. Okay. So whether you are a mom, a stepmom, someone who has motherhood on their heart, someone who has fatherhood or parenthood on their heart, or is simply holding space for a lot of children, right? In other capacities, these are teachers, these are folks who are in ministry, these are people who are in the therapeutic space, right? If you are holding space for littles, then this episode is for you. So I want to start with a question. Have you ever told your child that they can speak up, but then watched yourself real time go into people pleasing? Okay. I want to give you an example of this. So recently, well, at the time of this recording, right? So I'm recording July 2025. Last month, my incredible OBM and executive assistant, she came and did a strategic planning weekend. I would say session, but session does not do justice. She came for a full weekend, like came into town and we posted up in my office. Okay. And we planned out all of 2026. It was incredible. The amount of work that we got done, the momentum that we built. Anyway, at the end, we went to this place in Frisco called Heirloom Hall, and it's real cute. It's like tea party vibes. Okay. And she had brought her mom and her daughter with her. So I brought sister, and it was so much fun. My daughter was so excited. She had her princess dress on, like she was talking about tea, and something that I really praise her for is her strong voice, and she loves singing loud, and it's just the best thing to get to witness. Anyway, we're in this space and this place is like fairly empty, right? Fairly empty. And she started singing like at the top of her lungs. And I instinctively, even though I've told her like a million times, I was like, oh my gosh, we can't do this. Oh my gosh, right? Like we're in public. What are you doing? Versus what I wish I did was if I could go back in time, what I wish I did was I wish I went to like the owner or whoever's working there and been like, hey, is it okay if she sings? It feels really cool in her body to sing in this space because like it's empty. So there's a really cool echo, and arms were out. It was incredible. So it was two conflicting messages, right? And that's really what we're getting into. And if you've raised children, right, then you know the experience of looking at them and saying, hey, you can do this, but then you turn around and do the opposite. Another really good example of this, I can be very, very self-critical of myself, right? I think any high-performing human can relate to this idea of, I know that I'm good at what I do, but I want to be better. And there's such a fine line there. There's such a fine line of staying hungry, but also like feeling peace and contentment with where you're at, right? So something I talk about with both of my kiddos quite a bit is, actually it's okay just to play. We don't always have to be doing things. We don't have to always be taking care of the people around us. We have to learn how to be bored. When behind closed doors, or for me, real time, that's very challenging for me. Even when I'm resting and relaxing, I want things to do to stay busy. So I have to be very intentional about okay, I'm going to color, I'm going to do something. But again, it's this idea of paying attention to what are you modeling, what's actually happening real time versus what words are you handing your kids, right? What we embody is so much more important. And that's the energy that they are going to absorb from us. Okay. The point is that children are watching how we regulate, how we rupture and repair, and how are we treating ourselves. That's what they inherit. They do not inherit the list of rules that we give them. They don't inherit the family mission statement that we've decided we're going to put on our wall in the kitchen, right? They are inheriting how we relate to ourselves. So some really common patterns that I see with my high achieving moms that come in is over explaining or over correcting. So really moving into this place of control, right? And really this comes from, it makes me think of a past episode where I talked about acknowledging that there can be multiple ways to do things. I actually tend to push my clients into learning a little bit about Buddhist parenting, and not so that you become a Buddhist, but they really emphasize the importance of stepping back and allowing a child to have their own experience, right? The reality is, it's like kids typically don't need a big, long explanation. And if they do, they're going to ask for it, especially when they're little. I am so guilty of this. I want to have a whole conversation with my kids. And like my daughter's almost 3 years old. She's like, cool, I stopped paying attention 15 minutes ago. Like, all you need is a quick repair and to move on. And the other thing is being very mindful of, are they hurting themselves? Are they hurting someone else? Or are they damaging property? If we're not doing those three things, chances are you can step back and just allow them to have their own experience. Because if you don't, they again are going to inherit this internal critic. The other common parenting pattern that I see here is rescuing their child from discomfort. So these women are phenomenal at using their prefrontal cortex to anticipate danger, to anticipate hardship. And we come with this idea of, I want things to be easier for my child than they were for me, because usually there was a sincere hardship and trauma that took place in their history. So they start projecting, I don't want my kid to experience that. Oftentimes what I'm reminding these women of is, these children have a different baseline than you did. They have a different set of parents. They are having an entirely different experience than you. And our job is not to protect our children from everything. Our job is to help our children get in touch with who they are and to prepare them inevitably for the world, right? And in order to do that, we have to allow them to experience discomfort in developmentally appropriate ways. Now, am I saying, like yesterday, we were leaving one of my friend's house. She's a neighbor, dear friend, and my daughter was very dysregulated. She hadn't napped. I knew like we were biologically dysregulated. We weren't having a tantrum. It was time to get home because I needed to toss her in some water or let her go in the backyard. Like, she was throwing things in the garage, and that's a hard line for me. We're not going to disrespect other people's property. When she realized I was actually going to make her leave, she was very angry and took off running down the driveway. Meanwhile, I see a van that's coming down like the road, right? So naturally, I like just about tackled her to the ground because I was like, absolutely not. That was not a moment to just let her ride out the discomfort. That was like, safety is an issue. So I'm not saying go and let your kids put themselves in a dangerous situation, in developmentally appropriate ways, right? Like, what I'm saying is, if you notice that your kid is about to make a decision that then they are going to be very upset about, maybe let them make it and let them learn about that discomfort, right? Let them learn about the natural consequence that comes. My son threw his water cup on the ground. I knew that he wanted that water cup, but this is a game that he is playing right now. And so I didn't pick it up. Like, I picked it up once, and after that I was like, all right, Bubba, like, this is the last chance you get, dude. And from there, when he threw it on the ground again and looked at me, I was like, no, dude, like, now you're going to be uncomfortable, and that's a real bummer. We really want to be mindful of not rescuing our children from their own discomfort. The next pattern that I see is seeking perfection in parenting really is a form of like control or self-control, right? So parents, mothers, the moms that I work with, they always want to know, like, how could I be doing this better? Or they'll jump onto Marco and they'll say, hey, this is what I said. This is how I'm doing it. Do you think this is okay? What are your thoughts on this? And this is a fine balance, because oftentimes I tell my clients that it is very, like, you cannot learn to speak a language until you've heard it. So there's a real time element to this of, part of the reason I charge what I charge, all the things, is so that I can be on call with my clients to give them real-time feedback. Hey, this sounds phenomenal. You were present, you were attuned, keep up the good work. Or, hey, this was fantastic. And also, I want you to consider adding this element in. I want you to consider reframing a little bit here for you, right? Like giving that real-time tweak the way that like a coach does, right? But oftentimes what I see, like the dynamic that's playing out here, is that there can be some perfectionism that shows up for moms in how they are parenting. And it's just another way of trying to control an outcome on something that we by nature do not have control over, right? It tends to be very fear-based. All of this is important because those emotions, like that's what gets inherited by our kids. That's what's coming into the energetic relationship with our children rather than grounded trust. And so then we wonder why our kids have anxiety or why they're really angry all the time, right? So here's what this is unintentionally teaching our children is that my feelings are not safe. Love is earned by being good, because that's literally what women, like this is what their mom is doing. They're trying to be good enough to earn this relationship with their kid. And, or I have to manage others in order to feel okay. All right. Like this is what is being modeled because this is what's behind the dynamic. And again, that is what gets inherited by our children. So now I want to flip this just a little bit and I want to give you some reframes here, okay? Because this isn't about going down the list of all the things you could be doing better and all the ways you could be improving. I just want to give you a few tweaks here, a few different ideas that you can introduce in this relationship with your child. And by the way, like this, it doesn't matter how old your kid is. You can introduce this into the relationship at any time, because even if they are a grown adult with their own children, you are still their parent. Okay. So I want to introduce the reframe of it is not about perfection. Gonna say that again. If you're taking notes, I wanted to have a star. I wanted to have a star and an underline, bold, all the things. Okay. Parenting is not about perfection. It is about repair and it is about pattern interruption in terms of managing or looking at outcomes for what we can expect to see, right? I hear this a lot from my clients and on discovery calls. How do I know I'm making progress? First of all, you trust that you can like get quiet with yourself and you can answer that question for yourself. But second of all, we're looking for pattern interruption. We're not looking for perfection. We are looking for being able to identify a trigger and do something different. Okay. Now, some examples of what healed parenting might sound like is I need a break and I still love you. This is like shout out to all of the toddlerhood mamas out there who are like fighting for their life, fighting for their life and also just embracing the whimsy and everything that comes with just having like these precious little feral gremlins who are discovering the world in the most magical way, right? I need a break and I still love you. So in our house, I have started trying to set a timer anytime I have to leave because I'm typically the one who's getting dysregulated more / my dysregulation. So my husband's, he goes internal. He gets very quiet. He kind of withdraws, right? Versus I get loud and explosive. This is a result of both of the ways that we were raised. And so I try to be very, very mindful of my dysregulation because it amps up our kids, right? And so part of what I am telling my daughter whenever I notice that I'm getting dysregulated, or my son, oh my gosh, especially if they bite me, like, fly off the handle really quick. Usually it sounds like, hey, like mom has like loud feelings in her body. She needs to go take a break. I still love you. Let's set a timer. I'm going to come back in 10 minutes when this timer goes off and I will be back. And I hold to that. Right? But this way they know like what you are modeling in that moment is taking care of yourself, filling your cup, going and like taking a deep breath, screaming in a pillow. But like in essence, what you're doing is you're taking care of your body. You're asserting that you are important, just like they're important. And you're modeling that you can still stay in connection with someone, even if you're putting yourself first. Okay. Another one is, I'm sorry that I got loud. Let's take a deep breath together, or I'm going to take a deep breath, right? This one can also look like just straight up modeling what you want your child to do. So if you got loud, if you're raising your voice, it might look like hand on chest and just like deep breathing, right? Like in through your nose and out through your mouth. So it could be inviting them in, saying, let's take a deep breath together, or it could just be straight up modeling this. Important thing here is you are modeling a coping skill, but even more so, you're apologizing for getting loud, right? When you're yelling at someone, you're not moving in a space of respect. You're moving in a space of violating someone's boundary. You're scaring them, possibly, right? And so it's not about never raising your voice. Like trauma is not trauma because someone yelled at you. It's because someone didn't come behind and say, I shouldn't have done that. And here's how I'm working on doing things differently and then actually doing them different. It's about the repair, right? So here we are modeling an apology for an appropriate thing. Now notice I'm not saying, I am so sorry that I got loud. That was horrible of mama. She never should yell, and it will never happen again. And I'm such a bad mother. Like, we're not going on this spiral of like attributes about what it means. Like, no, when we're overwhelmed, sometimes we yell. That behavior can be both parts human and also like not okay. We can work on it, right? You are modeling humanity here. The other shift that you can introduce is letting your child be angry without being upset or fixing it. Oh my gosh, this is huge. With little kids, with older kids, with whoever, right? With adult children, allowing your child to have their own emotional experience and not fixing it, meaning you can reflect it, right? So a lot of what I'm teaching my clients to do, especially if we're looking at some parenting things, is honestly almost giving them like some therapeutic training. So reflective listening. This works a little bit better with little kids, right? I'll translate it to what it sounds like with teenagers in a minute. But yeah, hey, like that was really, really scary. And now I see that you're crying and it's okay to cry, right? Or, oof, like you are angry. Yep, you are very angry. And then as a teenager, right? Like it might be more empathic, more soft whenever you're talking to a little kid, but when you're talking to a teenager, it's probably not going to go over very well. At that point, it might sound like, yeah, it totally makes sense to me that like you're upset. Right. And like you're validating their experience. You might not necessarily be changing a boundary or changing your answer, but simply saying like, yeah, that makes sense to me. You make sense to me. I would be upset if someone told me that too. Doesn't change my answer, but it makes sense to me, right? Simply validating their experience rather than, oh my gosh, it's not that big of a deal. Stop crying. Or like, what is wrong with you? Why do you always get so sensitive about this stuff, right? Like that's an attack on a person and a character. And really what it is stemming from is I can't handle other people's emotions because I was never taught how to do that. Okay. So really what I want you to be doing is to be healing and modeling self-trust, because self-trust is a relationship that you have with yourself. And here is what you do whenever you decide to move into your healing. If a part of that for you is developing this trust with yourself. And what I mean by self-trust is, how do we learn to trust someone, right? We learn to trust someone because their behavior has been congruent with what they have said over and over and over again. If we can develop that congruence with ourselves, so being able to say, I am exhausted and I need a break, therefore I go and take a break. Or I am overwhelmed and angry about always having to be the person, or feeling as though I always have to be the person who initiates these meetings over and over and over again with my partner. Therefore, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to have a conversation. I'm going to take care of myself. I'm going to start putting myself first, right? And you're not interested in doing it perfect. Instead, you are interested in building a relationship with yourself. Again, relationships are not about perfection. It's not about rupture. It's about repair. So even when I have this moment of my little speaks up, my inner child speaks up and says, I need play, I need rest, I need whatever, but then I move into a very busy week. It's not about the busy week and I didn't meet this need. It's about how quickly can I get back on track and truly develop this relationship with myself, right? When you do this, you are actually giving your child permission to feel their feelings, to trust their own reality. So what they think and what they feel is valid and it makes sense. You are giving them permission to speak their truth without fear, without rehearsing a million different times. Did I say it right? Right? you're also trusting them to trust their body, their instincts, their sensations, their intuition, right? Their connection with source, because they have not been severed from that over and over again. When you regulate yourself, you are helping them to learn what co-regulation and regulation feels like. This is different than just compliance. Compliance is going to move from a prefrontal cortex place, right? I know that I feel anxious and overwhelmed, but I just need to get this list done, right? That's pushing through. That's driving. That is compliance. That is obedience, right? What I am interested in you handing down to your children is regulation, is knowing when we move out of our window of tolerance and we move into this place of stress, they know how to get themselves back to a place of regulation, because they will go through stress no matter what. That is just life. Life is going to hand them challenges. It's going to kick them in the butt. It is going to teach them lessons that we have no control over. But if you can hand them an inheritance of knowing how to listen to themselves, knowing that they are capable of taking care of themselves, whether that's by themselves or by asking for help, and knowing that they know who they are, you've handed them the world. They can handle any stress in that, right? It's exactly what I tell my clients, is like they will have this, inevitably we come to this point, this reckoning of, if I do this, my marriage might not survive. If I do this, my business might not make it. And what I remind them of over and over and over again is you are phenomenal at reading the data. Like if you are my people, you know how to read the data and you know how to pivot. Relationships are no different. Marriages are no different. Businesses are no different. It just feels higher stakes because you're bringing more of yourself to the table, right? That's what you're handing your kids when you show up for yourself first and you start building this self-trust internally. You are handing them the knowledge that they can truly, in a terrifyingly existential way, they can do whatever they want in their life. And depending on what you believe life is all about, right? Like I always say that I believe what I want out of this life. What I know to be true for me is that I want to milk this experience for all that it has to offer. Like I want all of the shiny. I want all of the things that I want, right? And that changes in seasons, and that's okay. That doesn't make anything less valid than the other. And oh my gosh, I want my children to have all of those experiences for themselves too. I want them to fulfill whatever it is that they want to get out of this life, right? I'm just so grateful to get to share this experience with them. I don't want to put my experience on them. And when you hand someone self-trust, that's what you're handing them, right? You're also handing them values. You're also handing them beliefs, but you're also handing them the freedom to be able to decide, does this make sense for me or do I want something different? So 3 big takeaways I want to leave you with for this episode is to name your feelings out loud. Okay? Because all feelings are okay. Repair when you rupture is 1,000,000 times more important than the rupture itself. Perfectionism is not a factor. It is not possible in parenting. And I also want to remind you to let your kids see you rest and not just hustle. Okay? Alrighty, guys, that's all I have for you today. I will see you in the next one. Alrighty, friend, that is all for today's episode of the Aligned Powerhouse Podcast. I want to thank you so much for tuning in. And do me a favor, if this episode resonated, I want you to share it with another powerhouse woman in your life who is ready to lead and love from a place of self-trust. And don't forget to follow, subscribe, and leave a quick rating or review. It really does help more women find this work. New episodes drop every week. Until then, lead with self-trust and let yourself be seen.